Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashaധ്യായിനീം Ambatvam Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamrutatuhe Namaha Vasute Vasutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. So we are going through the 9th chapter. Today we will try to cover shlokas 11 to 13. And in the reflection time, just last week, I came across this quote by Puja Gurudev, Swami Chinmayananda, where he says, they are in me, I'm not in them. This must be the attitude in the seat of meditation. So all the disturbances can pass by without affecting us. So that's the key thing here of the shloka. And when we covered the shloka itself, we had talked about how when we keep this in mind, that they are in me, but I'm not in them, the emphasis is actually on defining who that I is. When I identify myself with my body, mind, and intellect, I automatically think that is who I am. And through this identification, anything that affects the body, mind, intellect, I think that I am affected. But when I say that I am not in them, where this I now is referring to that supreme consciousness, and I'm identifying myself as the supreme consciousness, then in that case, what happens is any kind of issues that I face, I'm able to say that I am not in those disturbances. So automatically, anything that bothers us, whether it is something somebody said or the external atmosphere, like you said, the temperature is really low, it's around 25, the cold doesn't affect me, my emotional state doesn't affect me. Intellectually, when, as I said, if I'm not able to get where I am in my career, or whatever I said very intellectually, somebody doesn't agree with me, none of those things affect me because I am not identified to those koshas, where the koshas are the ones that is going through all these disturbances. But I, as Sakshi, I'm away from that. So that is the essence which we saw in Shlokas 3, 4, but it keeps coming up again and again. And in Shloka number 9, I think this part of it where the Sakshi Bhava is what we discussed. And that is where we left off last time. So I just wanted to emphasize that aspect of it. So we saw these features of God. We talked about it last time, about the various aspects of Ishvara and, of course, also Brahman. So in the form of Brahman, this entire creation is avyaktaha, it is unmanifest. The other word for this world is prakriti, and that prakriti is also maya. So these are all synonyms. But then as Brahman, that God aspect is sarvagatatvam, it's all pervading. In the form of Ishvara, it is the support, of course, as Brahman, it is the support of the whole world. The world itself being the manifestation or the vyakta aspect of that absolute reality. And then it is asangatvam, and I'm sure you all can relate this to space. Space is completely untouched. And that world is also, or Ishvara is the Srishti Laya Karanam, the response, is responsible for that Srishti or creation, and is also responsible for that Pralaya. So Laya referring to dissolution, and is also responsible. So we saw all this. And so in Shloka 7 to 10 last week, we had covered basically what is that Prakriti, because up to 6 was very powerful. It was all about the aspect of, they are in me, I'm not in them, all those things we had talked about. But then starting from Shloka 7, we saw this aspect of how the creation happens and what is dissolution. So that was the explanation for that Jagat Karanatvam of Ishvara. So that is where, Krishna, for example, starts to talk about how even before the creation of the universe was already there. It's not that Krishna came into the scene and then he created the whole universe and then he basically got the universe to die. It's not like that. So that is where, the shloka of Sarva Bhutani Kaunteya, Prakritim Yanti Mamikam, Kalpakshaya Punastani, Kalpado Visrujami Aham. So he talks about, like in the 8th chapter, we talked about this kalpa, which has about this yuga, Brahma's Brahmaji's day and night. We talked about all this, and so he's talking at this from his level. So Ishvara being the creator of the whole entire Jagat, the entire universe, and from that level, he says, so he was there, all beings, they merge into me. So they merge and then they come back. So in science, we talked about last time about how this law of conservation of matter, if we want to look at this entire universe as nothing but energy, and this energy basically takes the form of matter, and the universe is all built, but then it just goes back and comes, so it's a cyclic process. There is nothing that was totally newly created, even though in this world of changes, when we see, fashions come and go, or in my world, in my past world of patterns and papers, we talk about as if I created something new, but in reality, everything was already there in the universe. And in order to understand this better, we have these almost 3 examples, just like how a huge tree exists within that small seed. We don't even think about it, but it is, the tree is the manifest form of something that existed in the seed. The seed grows and becomes that huge tree. Some of them are fast growing, some of them are slow growing. We were driving to our site yesterday, and we had just planted some trees. And it's amazing how much of technology there is now, where you can plant some trees which grows really fast. And we're going to have inauguration very soon in 2 months' time. and we want some of the trees to grow really fast, so you can do all these things, but idea is those trees at one point existed in just this one seed form, and so too this baby, which is in the womb when it is growing, one doesn't have an idea as to how small it was. So so today the child may be a 6 foot or a even close to 6.5 foot, basketball player or something. But at one point, it was in such a tiny form. So this is the aspect of avyakta to vyakta, which we saw this. And, so all this we may is Krishna is saying that all this details of this universe, that is what we see, is already there in this DNA, in the small DNA we say, it's already coded. We talk about coding in computers, and DNA is a code. In genetics, these things are already there in some form. And this is what we call this is Prakriti or Maya. So the whole world is in the seed form. The matter actually is in a very potential state. That potential state, then becomes manifest, and the whole world comes into being. So this is what we said, and this we saw this last time also, about how it's covered in the second chapter, as well as the eighth chapter. The whole world comes into manifestation. Again, it goes back to unmanifestation, just like so the creation is nothing but an expansion, contraction, unfoldment, and then kind of a foldment. So everything happens there. But then we really wonder, is it really the case? All this sounds great on paper. And even with the amount of pictures that we are showing, even though I see all this, it really makes us wonder. And we wonder if this is really possible. And therefore, we look at the simplest way to example this is in the form of a dream. So we see essentially this entire creation is that at the level of Ishvara. Okay. It's not that if I look at it as me, the individual, this body, mind, intellect, did I create this? Not really. I did not create this entire universe. But me, as the ultimate supreme reality, is responsible for this world. That's how we look at it. And to explain this, we can look at it from a dream perspective. Like, for example, when I dream, in my dream, I may go all the way from America to Japan to Europe, and then come to India, have a good time with my relatives, then go back to Singapore, and then come back to US. All this, I can do it within a fraction of, sometimes even a minute of a dream, right? So all this happens in my mind. So many different scenarios. I've created the whole thing. But then when I wake up, what happens? Everything gets folded. So imagine now this whole thing being that dream of that Ishvara, so that it's at that level. So there is that whole permutation combination that can happen in a dream. All this is happening at that level. So this dream-like world, we can say is in Brahman, this one in an unmanifest form. And that is what we call as the Maya or Prakriti. Okay, it's almost so, and it's in this presence of Brahman that the whole world is created, it rises, and it goes and it goes back. So literally, Krishna, he's sort of like shaking Arjuna with his word Kaunteya, in this verse, he says, hey, Kaunteya, wake up. What, of course, by ninth chapter, Arjuna is a little more kind of stabilized, and he's listening very intently. But you can imagine in the first and second chapters, right? He was really shaken up so much, and Krishna is actually elevating Arjuna to the point of, trying to say that, hey, you are part of this Srishti. You're the one who created this whole Srishti. And therefore, try and see how you don't get affected by it. Because all this is just, it's a cyclic process. So he says, Sarva Bhutani Prakritim Yanti, and all the beings, they come to me in whatever form, the unmanifest form. And just as the manifest form is nothing but is dependent upon that waker, the dream gets manifest in me as a waker. So too, this unmanifest dream vasanas of the entire universe is nothing but is in that Brahman, In that Brahman, the entire world is projected. And that comes and goes again and again and again. And so that's why in the shloka, he says the world, just like that, the world also resolves into Prakriti, which is dependent actually on me, Mamikam, Mamikam in me alone. And when does that happen? He says, of course, Kaunteya, please don't get frightened here. All this is happening. Like, for example, at the end of this 2000 Chaturyugas, Kalpa, which is, one Kalpa is 2000 Chaturyugas, the 1000 Chaturyugas of the day and 1000 of the night. So at the end of that, he says, this duration may seem such a long time, but then it is in that 2000 that this entire universe is going through this cycle. Of course, at the individual level, it is happening at a much shorter time. Just like, for example, if an ant, an ant were to look at this human being, for an ant, and not just ants, some of these insects, which comes during rain time, which will just stay for a fraction of maybe an hour or something, and then it dies, An ant also, the same thing. The lifetime is so small. When compared to the ant, a human being's lifetime is so huge. And compared to a human being, now the Brahmaji's lifetime is about 2000 Chatur Yugas. So that's the whole part of it. And that's why this Kalpa, he says, at the end of Kalpa, this whole thing is happening all the time. So this whole creation is nothing but it's a cyclic process. So this is why we pray to Lord Shiva. Shivaratri is coming up very soon. And we find that this creation is nothing but he's a constructive recycler, and he takes care of the creation. He takes care of the dissolution. And we have now Brahmaji, who's a creator. So it's a whole thing. It's a cyclic process. So essentially, what we are seeing here is they are in me, as an extension of the shloka number 4, they are in me. All the creation is actually nothing but in me. He's saying, so it is an explanation also of this universe, the creation of the universe, the Jagat Karanatvam, so that is what is given here, which was explained in the 5th shloka. So then he says, what is really his function? He says, Prakritim Swam Avashtabhya Visrajami Punah Punaha Bhuta Gramam Imam Kritsnam Avasham Prakrite Vashat. Prakrite Vashat. So he says, all I do is I just keep this creation going again and again and again, So he is now in the previous one, he talked about the material cause of the whole world. Here he's talking about how he is we call this as the efficient cause of the nimitta karanam, just like how we discussed in one of the previous classes about how we have the potter and the potter's wheel and the potter himself, or let's take even an IT example. We have the designer of the entire computer and the computer itself. The computer itself is the material cause, the material which has come out of the material cause of Ishvara. Now here we are talking about the design part of it. So we are the efficient cause, we call this. So it is that ultimate reality who is the one who is actually willing, who has allowed this creation to happen. So And in Bhagavatam and other places, we see how we say that it is that Brahman is the cause, and Brahman just willed or thought, or if you want to take as Narayana, for example, Narayana just thought about it and the whole world came into being. So it was a sankalpa from that end. So this avashtabhyaha, which he talks about here, essentially means that he is the one who actually kind of breathed into it. It's like, when we think about a balloon, okay, we buy these pack of balloons from the store, and then what do? We just blow into it, and once we blow into it, that balloon really shapes up, and then it gives shape to the balloon, right? So that is what here too. You see Brahman essentially animating that whole universe. Otherwise, it would have been just, dull things all over. Everything would be in the form of inert materials, but he gives life to the whole universe. So he breathes into it. So that's the word avashtabhyaha, basically, animating all this prakritim. And then he basically sends forth these beings. But then, why are these beings different, right? So, bhuta gramam imam kritsnam, all these bhutas, why are they different? Why, what is the role in there? So he says, basically all I'm doing is all these beings, they have so much of vasanas in them. They have their own DNA imprint, because of which I have to send them out. They have to go back and fulfill all their vasanas. All I'm doing is I'm just giving them the animation or the energy. But each beings have essentially come out because of their own vasanas, and they are kind of helpless. And that is that word avasham. Avasham essentially meaning that, they, vasham rather, they are very helpless. They helplessly, due to their own nature, prakriti, avashat, so they are, avasham actually here means sent out, helplessly sent out. Prakriti through because of their own nature means their own vasanas, they are sent out. So this is why he says, aham punaha punaha visrujami. I just basically, all my job is to keep this cycle going. That's all that I'm responsible for. But the beings, they come out on their own. So that is that this one. So this entire multitude of these beings, it doesn't matter what it is. I'm not responsible for that is their own nature, their own blueprint, which is making them come out. And so what are those kind of different beings? They're essentially anything which has this life in them. All this is something that I just allow them to happen. And just another example here, which is, so he describes this working of this Prakriti by saying, the Prakriti is essentially Ishvara's projector. And basically, he just projects an entire universe of this names and forms at the beginning of the cycle. And then he just withdraws them back into that reel, that, what you see there. So that is how this whole Prakriti and Ishvara cycle keeps going on and on and on. So we are in this also the few other points. Actually, I'm just putting a few more points here from last time what we talked about. He just to see that, so Ishvara fully controls the entire Prakriti, okay, and he's like the commander of it. But what is Prakriti? Prakriti is basically that whole is a system that has to actually follow the rules of everything. I mean, each one of us are really, really connected to each other. We are connected together. We actually work together, and but then none of those things can happen without really the Ishvara being commanding the whole thing. But then he doesn't really tell Prakriti on how to do the job. That part of it is something that together we actually make it happen. So why is it that in in Ukraine we have a problem, or why is it we have a problem in Israel or Palestine? It is not Ishvara who is making this happen. It's basically the vasanas of that particular area decided to come together and make some of those larger actionable items, if you want. That is how the whole thing works. So, as put up here, Prakriti is basically made of these gunas. If there is an imbalance in the amount of gunas, then there is a certain observable action that is coming out from there. So if there is too much of rajas in the system combined with certain amount of tamas, you see some bad things happen. Or if there is too much of sattva and some amount of rajas, for example, then you see some certain actions happening. So why is it again, you have, say, for example, in a certain area, the GDP is different. So about 10, 15 years ago, uh, or maybe even 20, starting from then, China started really becoming so prominent in the world scene, almost coming up to the level of US in its economy and everything. All this is actually the whole system effect. It's not that Ishwar is partial to China and now he's partial to India and tomorrow he'll be partial to Russia. Nothing like that. He just makes sure things are happening in such a way it follows the system rules. There is dharma in everywhere. So that's the relationship between Ishvara and Prakriti. But relationship between Prakriti and individuals. So individuals, each one of us are controlled by our own nature. And because of that, we go through, Avasha, that word that was used, we helplessly go through this infinite cycles of birth and death because of the influence of our own individual Prakriti, So the only way we can actually come out of this influence of our own individual Prakriti is really in our actions. In our actions, we have a choice whether to become, just go with the flow of our own Prakriti or take it upon our hands and do something about it in understanding what final liberation really means, what moksha means, and putting that effort and working towards that liberation. So let me stop here and ask if there's any questions, because we are going to move into the next section from the. Is it too confusing, or is it a little more clearer compared to the last week? I just thought I should put some more effort into what we had already discussed last week. Guys, are okay?
Yeah, it's making clear.
Very
Yes.
good.
Hari Om, thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So in Shloka 9, now he talks about the last description of Ishvara. So far, we talked about some of the various various descriptions of Ishvara, Jagat Karanam, Nimitta Karanam, he's the one who brings everything into manifestation, etc. So now we're coming to the point of why does Ishvara create the whole thing? When Krishna says, I'm the creator of the universe, so one may think, okay, so what is so different about him and me? I'm performing a lot of actions every day from the morning to the evening. With some of them are, of course, nitya karma, some of them are naimittika karma, some of them sometimes I may do something which is really against my own rules, what I've set up, all this, right? So what is really the difference between my creation and Ishvara's creation? Because Ishvara is also really creating the world. He said he's the creator of the whole world, right? So the very production of this universe itself also seems to be a kind of an action. So he is the creator of the universe, or we call this as Srishti, which is this universe. Karta, he's a creator. He is a creator of this whole thing. So should he not also have a similar attitude like we all have? Because whenever I do something, I expect some kind of recognition. I expect somebody should pat my back. I expect somebody to give me a reward. All this happens, right? Because I want to really enjoy the effort of doing something. I'm looking for all that. But does Ishvara also look at it the same way? Does he do that? So here we see a beautiful thing coming up where he says, I am actually neither I'm a karta and a bhokta. Karta means somebody who is doing an action, but when we say karta, the word actually means not just doing an action, but I take a lot of onus as I am doing something. And bhokta basically means enjoying the fruit of that action. And but again, enjoying the fruit of action as me, the person. I am the one who did this action. I am enjoying it. So here he's saying that, I'm a karta and a bhokta. I'm neither the creator, in the sense I'm not taking onus for the creation as I am doing it. But at the same time, because I don't take that, obviously I do not take on the role of the enjoyer itself. In a sense, if you look at it from a very scientific point of view, then who is the karta and who is the bhokta? Then it is the entire, it is the individual egos in each one of us. The whole thing is actually the karta. And because each one of us is part of this cosmos, is part of the bigger fabric, we all are enjoying or suffering the consequences of not just our own individual actions, but also our actions along with the others. So for example, if I'm working as in a team, as a team of 10 people, I'm working together in a project. Now, the success of the project will depend upon how much am I sinking my own ego and thinking of myself as being part of the team and doing the best I can. When I do that, whatever the results comes for the whole team, the results are, of course, not only for me, but also for my whole team. So now we are talking about a team of 5 or 10 people. Now imagine a whole team of, which is this whole universe, where we have, I don't know, trillions or whatever number of egos which are working together in creation, in bringing this whole thing forward, right? So that's the part that is what here Ishwar is saying, that he says, Nachamam tani karmani nibatnanti dhananjaya udasinavat asinam asaktam teshu karmasu. So it looks like I'm doing it. So this is really a great answer for a lot of people who says, why did God punish me? Why is it that this is happening to me and me alone? Everybody seems to be enjoying, or in so many different ways, this question keeps coming up again and again and again, right? It may be a small thing, like even in an accident, for example, sometimes we find, especially with the snowy patches that you all are facing, the previous guy would have gone just fine, but my car gets into one snowy patch and it goes off the road. Why me? So is God doing this to punish me? No, God is not doing anything to punish me. It's my own prakriti, my own nature, which is doing it. So that's why Ishvara is like, he's saying, hey, wait a minute. Don't blame me for all this, okay? So it looks like I'm doing it. That's why he's saying Nachamam Tani Karmani. It looks like I'm doing it. But guess what? I'm not the one who's doing it. So do not, and since I'm not doing, whatever I'm doing does not really affect me in the cosmic sense, because I'm very indifferent to them. I sit unattached. So that's what he's trying to say. And in shloka, in 5th chapter, became this beautiful shloka, Naiva Kinchit Karomiti, Yukto Manyet Tattvavidat, Pashyan, Sprishan, Jigran, the many different actions he was saying. So this shloka basically says all the actions that we all do, Ishvara is also doing at that high level, but Tani Karmani Mam Na Nibadnanti. He says all these things do not really affect me at all. So this is the secret. Ishvara seems to be doing everything, but at the same time, whatever he is doing, those karmas, he does not get affected by them. So how he manage this? Well, he doesn't really give up. It's not that as if he gives up all the karma, but he continues to do the karma, but he's not bound by it. So teshu karmasu asaktam, so he is completely unattached to the whole thing. So here we see again a beautiful lesson for us where we need to sacrifice our ego. We have to do this abhimana, which is ego, tyaga. I have to do an abhimana tyaga, and that is actually the secret for us for in so many different ways, for lessening the amount of stress we feel, and by giving up the abhoktritvam, by giving up this act of enjoying, then also it gives me a great feeling of freedom. I am independent. I'm not dependent upon any of the fruits of actions. If I do that, it just makes me again so calm because I have no expectations at all. So that frees me from the karma phala, the fruit of my action. That also I'm completely free of it. So in a sense, the shloka is talking about the the changelessness of Brahman. So Brahman is completely different and detached from his own creation. So the creation is happening, but he is not affected. Just like how when I dream in the night, and in my dream, I may have been chased by a tiger, and maybe here I have to say, maybe I would have seen some snakes. A lot of those things I've seen in my dream, but then when I wake up, nothing has happened. So that is the whole thing. Is I'm untouched, I'm not affected. Again, they are in me, but I'm not in them. So that aspect of it he's talking about. It's we call this actually the constant, the baseline. The baseline doesn't get affected at all. It's just right there. So very nice shloka about this. So remaining detached, he is, he's called as, he's a kind of a Sakshi Baba. So here in this next shloka, he says, Arjuna, I do not do anything. In my presence, everything is happening. So in Maya Adhyaksha, he says this in shloka number 10. So this is where we had finished last time, but I just wanted to give you some more information here. So Maya Adhyakshena Prakritihi Suyate Sacharacharam Hetunanena Kaunteya Jagat Viparivartate. So the whole world is just going on and on in my presence. This whole world of Maya is just going on this one. I'm just kind of like a supervisor, but I'm a supervisor with not specific thing to anybody. Even that is taken care of by the whole world. Again, when I gave this example of the team, if a team doesn't win, it is because of the actions in the whole team which was responsible for that particular team not winning or losing. It is not the supervisor of the team who is responsible for that. The supervisor just gives the rewards, for what it's done. But ultimately, the team is responsible. So, and we saw this 3 examples last time. So, Maya Adhyakshena, so Prakriti keeps the world rolling, but she needs a sentient presence, just like the electricity is here, giving electricity to all these different equipments. But ultimately, if the equipment fails, it is not because of the electricity. It is only because the equipment did not have the ability to use the electricity. So electricity is like a Sakshi Bhava. It gives animation, it gives the necessary energy, whatever is needed, but by itself, it remains, separate. So, Suyate Sacharacharam, both moving and non-moving things, he is completely, he allows things to happen. So, Hetunani Kaunteya, because of this, the world goes round and round. And so, any thoughts on these shlokas on the role of God? That is what he's trying to come to. It's the role of God here.
Hari Om.
Ananta?
Sloka number 10, Maya Jakshena Prakriti. Bhagavan is giving a message that staying non-attachment to, staying like non-attached to, karmas, even
Correct.
though we do day and night, that's the message Lord Krishna is giving. And
Correct.
then also like a Sakshi Bhavana message also.
Correct. Exactly. And that's why I just put these pictures to every time when you look at, because we spend a lot of time in the kitchen, whenever I go there, even as I'm using my refrigerator and my ovens and all that, let that give me an idea of this Sakshi Bhava. And that's what the means. So then the question comes is, now that we've seen this creation, and we have also seen who's responsible for the creation and everything, and who's responsible for the effects of the creation, question might come is, how do I recognize this Lord? How do I recognize this Lord when he comes into the creation, taking a human body? Yes, he has all these divine powers and everything, but then why is it that we are not able to recognize him in that form? So, in a sense, this is also giving us a reason um, to understand why some people are like complete atheists, or not just atheists, but there are also people who feel that they can do anything and everything and get away with it, you know. And such people will never ever uh, recognize this kind of a philosophy of how this world really has to function. They may think that, I know how things function. I will do it exactly the way I want it to happen. So some of these aspects he is going to address here. He is also going to address all misconceptions of Ishvara. So even though, he's always, Krishna has defined Ishvara as being very infinite, many people still, may get stuck with one form of Ishvara or the other. For example, even with Krishna, right? We hear so many stories of Krishna, but sometimes, depending upon my own Prakriti, I may view Krishna as different. I may say, how come, he was able to marry so many people, all the 16,000 wives? How did he have this? Or why did he, why did he, why was he so smart during the war and, gave certain tips to Arjuna, but did not, help Duryodhana or anything like that, So that all this, he wants to he addresses here. So let's chant the shloka. Avajananti mam moodaha manushim tanumashritam. Avajananti mam moodaha manushim tanumashritam. Param bhavamanantah. Param bhavamanantah. Mama Bhuta Maheshwaram. So here he's saying that, most people, actually most people in the sense here, he is actually being pretty strong also. He's saying Mudaha. Those people who do not have this level of understanding of the philosophy and this level of really understanding about what is this world about, what is this creation, who created, and this aspect of having that abhimana, for example. Such people, for example, he says, they will never understand that even if I come in person, when I dwell in this human form, they will never look at me as the higher form. Because if you remember, one of the first questions that Arjuna asked was, Krishna, you, you are the creator of this whole world. I just see you as a person in front of me. How is that? So of course, Krishna had a lot of regards for Arjuna, so he's not necessarily referring to him, but he's actually referring to people who are not even thinking about God. So he says, Param Bhavam Ajanata, they do not know my higher being as the Lord of all beings. So Avajananti, they do not know me, that I am this Lord here. When he's not seen by in the supervisor, then people say that he does not even exist, right? So one needs to at least first start with this premise that there is somebody who's higher than me. Only then, we can really come to see that. And because they do not know me, Krishna is saying, they do not know, they disregard me, they do not respect me, and they sometimes may go even to an extent of criticizing me. So that is what in Shloka 12, Sri Krishna is saying that, sometimes it's very, sometimes it's an insulting thing too, It's like, you give a Nobel Prize peace winners to an ordinary citizen, or to think that a junior public officer, for example, is this. And so people have all kinds of erroneous notions about really who that Lord is. So he says, he's again continuing that path of addressing those people who are unable to recognize that Ishvara. So he says, Moghasha Mogha Karmanaha, Moghasha Mogha Karmanaha, Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha, Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha. Rakshasīm āsurīm chaiva, Rakshasīm āsurīm chaiva, Prakritim mohinīm shritāha, Prakritim mohinīm shritāha. So he says, Mogha. Mogha, they have, useless desires. Mogha ashaha. Asha means desire. Mogha is something which is through a delusion. So this is a common word which actually does not add any value to life, something which really has no benefit at all. So sometimes, we have those kind of desires, and Moghasha, the man of vain hopes, of futile desires. And Mogha Karmanaha, who does actions to satisfy those kind of desires. And Mogha Jnanaha, they even do those actions based on false knowledge, futile knowledge. Mogha Jnanaha. So three things: Mogha Karmanaha, Mogha Jnanaha, Mogha Asha. All these things. These are the people who are the Rakshasin. They are of the nature of Rakshasas or Asuras because they have a lot of tamas in them. So tamas doesn't necessarily mean just people who are lazy and procrastinate and all that, but they are the people who have wrong notions about things. So this is a kind of thing that he's talking about. So three kinds of people filled with delusion. Now, one may look at this and say, why is really Krishna even thinking about these things? Why is he really spending so much of time to change our perception of Ishvara? Because he's doing this because he really wants us to rise way above in our thinking process. Ultimately, everything is in the mind. The mind is the one that creates all these delusions. So, but we need that. And it's like, for example, we give birth to our children, but then if we don't teach our child the importance of money, then importance of money and also the right way of earning it, then what happens is our child may just want to, I mean, sometimes it's very interesting actually. When I was a Balavihar teacher, uh, I remember when I was teaching the middle age, sixth, seventh grades, at that age, children are coming from very good families, right? But they go to school and they hear something else. So when you ask them, what do you want to do when you grow up? They'll immediately say, oh, I want to grow up and I want to earn $1 billion. That's the first thing that comes into their mind. But it would be nice if they can say, I want to earn $1 billion in the right way or whatever. If they can only put that one more sentence, So all this happens because we have this wrong mogha that I'm the body, mind, and intellect, and that is how I'm functioning. I just put this BMI chart here. We think we're this body, mind, intellect, and through this, we are dealing with the whole world of objects, emotions, and thoughts as a perceiver, feeler, and thinker. But in reality, I'm way above that aspect of it. So that's why Krishna is saying all these useless desires and actions are because of his body, of me, this one. So I need, from the time when I'm young, I need to be trained to see things in the proper manner so that I will not go into any of these gambling, etc., all this thing, and um, be affected by it. So just one, I know we are taking a little more time, just 2 more minutes. I just want to close this loop of this aspect here. So Krishna now describes then who are the people who actually treat Ishvara in the right perspective and who treat Ishvara as the place to go to uh, as a refuge, and they worship him with absolutely unwavering devotion. So with that, he actually starts the next set of shlokas, but you just share this one and talk about who are they. Mahatmanastu mam partha, Mahatmanastu mam partha, Daivim prakriti mashritaha, Daivim prakriti mashritaha, Bhajantyananya manasaha, Bhajantyananya manasaha, Jnatva bhutadimavvyayam, Jnatva bhutadimavvyayam. So the word ashritaha, which means the refuge or the place where I can rest. So whenever, if I'm in trouble, where do I go? Today, especially for the Gen Z and the younger generations, they go to a therapist, right? There are so many therapists which are being, the job of therapists have increased so much now, mainly because of the fact that, of course, for many good reasons too, because the whole society, the way it is going, many times you have children coming from broken families or children coming from families where the mother and father really don't understand the philosophy of life. So the child is unable to connect to the whole families themselves. So they all, I mean, just like you have your own private doctor, you have a therapist now where you're going for refuge. So here he's trying to say the only refuge if I can have is that God, that Ishvara. That is the biggest thing, and that's why he describes two different kind of people here. He says, those Mahatmas who are great souled and they understand the divine nature, Daivim Prakritim, and they are the two kinds who is Bhakta. One is the Bhakta of the Lord who's full of love and who looks at that Ishvara, and the second was Jnatva, one who has even come to a conclusion about his or her own identity with that ultimate Lord through knowledge, through, and complete understanding. Those two people, he says, are, they consider me as a refuge. And for such people, their they'll never consider problem as a problem. We'll just elaborate a little bit in the next week, and then we move on to shlokas 14 through, from 14 onwards, looking at more in detail of these people also. So, Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.